Be agreed. To the Honourable Mary Ann Street.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise and support the Tariff Malaysia Free Trade Agreement Amendment Bill. And in fact, if I thought I could help by taking a 5-minute call rather than a 10-minute call to get it passed sooner, I would do that. Because there are people who would benefit from this immediately on implementation. I am not a kiwi fruit grower. But if I were a kiwi fruit grower, then I would be waiting in anticipation of this being passed, because it is going to make an immediate difference to our kiwi fruit growers and exporters in New Zealand. It will mean that there will be a 15% saving for them, a tariff reduction on implementation of this free trade agreement. And so I welcome it appearing today. But I do want to take a few minutes anyway to talk about some of the economic benefits that will accrue to New Zealand from this free trade agreement, but also to talk about where it takes us from here, Mr Speaker, because one must always have an eye on the future with these kinds of agreements. First of all, of course, the economic benefits are not inconsiderable. Malaysia is New Zealand's 8th largest export market, totalling almost $1 billion in 2008. And as the Minister in his speech alluded to, between 2004 and 2008, exports to Malaysia grew by nearly 80%, which was more than double the rate of export growth to the rest of the world. There was, I think the Minister might have made a slight mistake with the figures that he was reading at one point. Certainly 95.1% of tariffs will go immediately on implementation, but it's 99.5%, and I think the Minister said 95.5% by mistake. I think that was simply an error. But 99.5% of all tariffs will disappear by 2016. Now, this is significant for two reasons. Not only do we get the majority of the tariff reduction immediately on implementation, but beyond that, we get almost everything taken away, almost every tariff reduced in a very speedy time frame. So by 2016, which is faster than the ASEAN FTA allows for in its terms. So in a sense, this is the ASEAN FTA. I think the Minister of Trade once called it, or referred to it, although I could be wrong, referred to it as ASEAN FTA on steroids. But it is certainly faster and more comprehensive in that respect than the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, which was a significant development in itself. Mr Speaker, of course, these kinds of things don't come out of a vacuum. They come out of a history. They come out of years of development. And so it is pertinent to pay tribute to previous ministers of trade, beginning with Jim Sutton, but also including Phil Goff, and now brought to its conclusion in good time by the current Minister, Tim Grosser. So all ministers deserve recognition for the work they put in, given that the negotiations around this began back in 2005. It was my great pleasure to accept an invitation from the Minister of Trade, Tim Grosser, to attend the signing of the Malaysian FTA in October of last year. And that is now a convention that is indicative of what is essentially a bipartisan approach to the trade portfolios in large measure. And during the course of that trip, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister John Key was also present, and he opened a new facility that Fonterra had developed out of Kuala Lumpur, which will be significant for our dairy exports, in that it was a manufacturing plant that allowed our dairy exports to be turned into products that were palatable to the Malaysian diet and appetite. And Fonterra is to be congratulated for its multi-million-dollar investment in that plant, and certainly the plant was very impressive. But if we did not have such an agreement as this, then it would be so much harder for Fonterra to make the gains that it is seeking to make by advancement and investment in the Malaysian market. Kiwi fruit, dairy products, meat and other food products, services and education are the critical components of this Malaysia Free Trade Agreement, and I welcome them. It's also important to draw two other things to the attention of the House. Not only are the now customary side agreements on labour and environment conditions also attached to this, because they are now conventional parts of the apparatus around free trade agreements, and so they should be. But there are two exceptions that have been included in this agreement that I think are again apposite, funnily enough, today, as we have just been passing a reading of the Waikato Tainui Bill, and the government has been emphatic about lauding the signing of a non-binding and aspirational declaration on the rights of Indigenous people. Again, here is something that makes Māori aspirations concrete. In this agreement, there is an exception around the Treaty of Waitangi, and it is consistent with New Zealand's previous FTAs. The Malaysian-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement maintains New Zealand's ability to take measures it deems necessary to accord more favourable treatment to Māori, including in fulfilment of its obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi. Now that is meaningful, and I say to the Māori Party, that is the way things are done. That is the way, with words on the page that are binding across nations, that the Treaty of Waitangi takes international status, has international recognition, and means something in this country. Secondly, there is an exception around the creative arts, and this again is something that Māori will have a profound interest in as well. It is the words on the page. It says that the Free Trade Agreement does not preclude New Zealand from taking measures necessary to protect national treasures, or taonga, specific sites of historical or archaeological value, or support creative arts of national value. Now that absolutely goes to Māori creative arts, things that are important to Māori, and I say again to the Māori Party, this is the way that those aspirations are concretised. This is the way that those aspirations for Māori, which we share and which we support, are given life, are given status, and are given meaning, not in empty rhetoric around a declaration which the Prime Minister is very keen to stress is non-binding and aspirational. This is how a parliament, a government, a country should make recognition of things Māori, things precious to Māori, real and protected and absolutely embedded not only in the law of this country, but in the way in which this country deals internationally with its trading partners. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that this piece of legislation also is a lesson for the Māori Party in how to do things in a real and meaningful way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John Hayes.